It's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Just as a precursor, I'm going to be drinking heavily during this one because I've had a really bad game week. Hello, so now the end is near, and so we face the final curtain, etc., etc., etc. It's a blockbuster end to the game week with that 5-3 result, and it's our final late night pod of this rump of a restart. Hooray for normal sleep schedules and the end of hard work. Well, overnight hard work, that is. Joined today again by Anthony and Nick. You're right, Nick? How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. We're here. It's the longest season ever, and it's reaching its final conclusion this weekend on Sunday. Just time for one final tinker before we all go again in a month's time, hopefully refreshed, and with those refreshed delusions of grandeur that we might actually do well at FPL again. Just to remind people who we are Who Got the Assists, and you can find us on Twitter, mainly at WGTA_FPL for Tom, at WGTA_Nick for myself, at FPL Stag for Anthony, and we're also on Instagram, so make sure to give us a follow there as well, WGTA.FPL. And so, yeah, we're joined again by Anthony. How are you?
Nick, Tom, good to be back again. We're almost there to the end of this season. Delusions of grandeur is definitely a good phrase to think of, really, Nick, because I guess we didn't think it would pan out this way, but we do actually have a race for the top four that's become a slow horse race, and United's form dip, it's really kind of rivaling Leicester's really since maybe Christmas time, so it's tough, and for me personally, delusions of grandeur. I've missed another Trent Alexander-Arnold haul after missing the game week 19 24 pointer. I vowed it would never happen again, but here we are. Anywho, let's move on to the agenda rundown before I go into the pit of despair on that one. We'll start off with our game week reviews as per usual, moving into the market forces, look at who people are buying, basically punts ahead of game week 38. Nick and I are both free hitting, so the main topic of this pod is pretty much going to be me and Nick talking about our free hit teams, and Tom talking about not being on a free hit and which punts I guess he'll be putting an emphasis on in his transfers ahead of game week 38. And then we'll move on to the listeners' questions, our transfers and our captains for the coming game week. But let's start with the game week review, and it's really odd.
Yeah, it is really odd. I'm going to go first, get it out of the way. I could insert a bleep noise here, which I probably should, to the answer of what went well, which we've got written here. Absolutely nothing. This is frankly one of those days I dislike being an FPL podcast because I want to come on and talk about it straight away, when actually what I want to do is go and lie in a ball and just cry. But the reality is that I haven't done very well, and I'm going to list off exactly why I haven't done very well for you two's benefit and everybody else's benefit.
It's like the Golden Cleric.
Except the inverse. I haven't won anything.
Yeah.
I've won the worst. The second worst. No, I'm the worst. So I sold Greenwood for Rashford, who I captained on a -4. I had no Burnley defender due to Charlie Taylor being injured. I didn't want to. I decided against taking -8 for the likes of Peters or Barsley. I had no Wolves defender because Seiss didn't play. I had no Sterling, so I needed the -12 to buy him. And I had Pulisic first on my bench. So I'm not even going to look at the update, basically, just for my own sanity. But I've fallen about 100,000 places this game week. I think there's 44 points net I've got, which basically has undone that bench boost. So if I believed in karma, I may think, it's all come round and I've had my good luck and now the bad luck is here, it's arrived. Yeah, so needless to say, I'm a little bit annoyed. Needless to say, as I said a little while ago, I'm drinking. But I guess it all comes down to the initial question that I asked a couple of weeks ago, the Outcome Bias pod. Was I happy with the decision I made? A small crumb of comfort is yes. Rashford's ownership was so low that if he'd have bothered showing up, cheers Dr. Marcus, that I'd have had a very large rank boost from that. Wood made sense to bring in ahead of Norwich. I should probably have looked at taking -8 for a Burnley player, but I mean, it's so easy to say after the fact. I was happy with the decision. I still am. I probably would do it again. Maybe I'd take a -8 for a Burnley defender in another world, but I mean, I think I was always going to do it given Rashford's ownership and given the effective ownership. It just seemed like that was a logical thing to do and put the caption on him. Yeah, really pissed off. That's just the way it goes, and I'll be fine. But yeah, at least I'm happy with the decision I made. Nick, you're middle of the pile. How have you done?
Yeah, so I'm not particularly happy with how the game week went, but concerning your score in comparison, I feel like I don't really have much of a right to be unhappy because it wasn't as bad as your game week. I finished it up with 67 points, and that's looking like a small green arrow for me. It started off pretty well with the double Burnley clean sheet with Pope and Tarkowski both getting me 6 points each. Didn't get Peter's 12-point heroics, but I can't complain about a double clean sheet there. And then I had Danny Ings, and he was a bit of a frustrating one in this game week, obviously, because he scored the first goal, then he missed a penalty, and it's a 9-point swing ultimately, and FPL ended up with just 4 points from him, so that was a bit annoying. And then we had the City game, 17 points. Sterling, obviously, probably the highlight of the game. We didn't captain him, but just having those 17 points is excellent. He did miss a penalty as well, but luckily he scored the rebound on that case. So happy with those points. Got 6 from De Bruyne. Unfortunately, Mahrez didn't start. Came on for a cameo, just got me 1 point, so that was a bit annoying again. But with Wolves, I had Roman Saiss, and he didn't show up. So I didn't get any points from Wolves and their clean sheets. Instead, I had Aaron Cresswell come on as a first sub. Not like Tom, who owned Dawson. I got 2 points on Cresswell. So I'll take those 2 points ultimately against Manchester United. But in that game, as obviously I captained Bruno Fernandes, and he chose this particular game week to get his first 1 pointer of the season. Nearly got himself sent off as well as he tried to headbutt whoever it was, Masuaku or someone. So that was a bit idiotic of him. Luckily, just escaped the yellow. Also, in Rashford, who only got 1 point in that game as well. But luckily, I had Mason Greenwood, who got the goal and the free bonus. So 9 points there. So again, kind of a mixed bag. Can't overly complain compared to Tom, but still a little bit frustrated with the 1 point haul from Fernandes, the captain. Finally, with the Liverpool game, Trent did the business. So happy with that, 13 points. But Pulisic on the bench didn't play or didn't start. So I was happy at first, but then he came on for a goal and assist and 9 points, which is annoying because if Pep hadn't played Mahrez, then I'd got those 9 points. But oh well, 67 points, pretty decent. How about yourself, Stag?
Okay, so I am top of the three of us for a third week in a row, which in and of itself, I guess, is a fright because I think that's the only 3 times that it's happened whilst I've been a host of this show. So I guess that's ridiculous in and of itself. But it was 82 points. That brings me up to just outside the top 500,000. Okay, all good so far. But when you consider that this was my bench boost week, I don't think it has been a massive success. Now, as I spoke about to all of you before, I ended up bench boosting now mostly because of indecision and pushing off and just hoping for something to happen that never really happened. So I bench boosted just because I had to in game week 37 because I'm free hitting in 38. And it wasn't the best of bench boosts, put it that way. Like the bench as I have it set up is Martinez, Egan, Lamptey and Cantwell. Lamptey obviously got his clean sheet, so 6 points there. Everyone else was 2. It wasn't a particularly successful bench boost. I guess in the context of a season where I've actually benched double figure hauls 15 times, and in 13 of the first 15 game weeks this season, I benched attacking returns or clean sheets of some kind or another. There were an awful lot of weeks where I would have done much better off my bench boost without even trying. And I know you'll say that some of that is pure coincidence and some of it would have been that there were players on the bench who had good fixtures, but just not as good as I thought, the 11 that I selected. So whatever, a fine bench boost, but not brilliant bench boost. McCarthy 7, Doherty 12, Pulisic 9, Sterling 17, unfortunately not captained, Martial captained 5, double to 10, Jimenez, and then that Lamptey clean sheet off the bench are pretty much my only returns this week. But look, 82 points is good. The real upswing for me is that after a really, really torrid season, with my free hit coming up in 38, I'm pretty much in the hunt for the monthly prize in every mini league I'm part of. And in a season where it looked like I was never going to get any money back, I could hilariously make all my money back on the final day of the season, which would be lovely.
Yeah, no, it's good. I'm still holding on to the fact that my bench boost is probably going to win the highest overall score, which is going to be great. And we'll come out next week, and you'll both be like, "Oh, I got 120. I got 121 actually." Cheers, Tom. Cheers, lads.
Yeah,
right.
Captain Harry Kane, he's got 70 points, Tom.
Oh, yeah. Captain Harry Kane got 35, and then Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who I also brought in, got 15, so 50 points from two players.
There is no world where I bring Calvert-Lewin into my team.
one to leave for the moment, but definitely is the case. Right. So next thing, of course, is the market forces. How we start off at every pod these days. It's the final market force of the season. Nick, I see you're holding a handkerchief up to your eye. It's a sad moment. It's got a bit of an English feel to it, doesn't it? An England hero feel to it. What's going on? It's all about Harry Kane, isn't it?
Yeah, so Harry Kane has shown up on the market forces. Can't remember the last time we mentioned him as part of this section, but he is the most transferred in player right now with 38,000 transfers in back-to-back braces for Harry. Puts him now on 17 goals for the season, and they're facing Crystal Palace, who have lost 7 on the bounce, having won only 1 game since the restart. Seems to be a little bit of spark back in the Spurs forward, who we've been pretty critical of, let's be fair, since we started the pod and since he came back, saying that, he's matching Conor Cody, all of that lark. But yeah, really good performances last couple of games. Looks like a decent asset. We'll talk about him a little bit more later on in the pod, but lots of people looking at him in the market. Otherwise, Sterling... and also David Silva being brought in terms of the midfielders, 33,000 transfers in for Sterling, makes him second most transferred in player right now. Silva's now 5th, 32,000. But yeah, it's very tight in terms of the top 5 transfers in right now. I guess that's quite logical, those moves. David Silva's final bow out, final curtain to that illustrious Premier League career, and he's certainly a player that will be missed. And with Sterling, pretty obviously, he's just netted a 17-point return. Norwich at home up next. I mean, there's not much else to say. It's obvious why people are bringing him in. But otherwise, it's making up that top 5, sandwiched between Sterling and Silva. It's Tarkowski and Peters that are being brought in, the Burnley defenders. So, yeah, they've kept 15 clean sheets this season, unbelievably. And Nick Pope is looking like he might have that golden glove wrapped up as well. And, they're also finishing above Arsenal, Tom, which I know you happily mentioned the other day about Spurs and Burnley being on the same amount of points. I think kind of makes sense. Lots of people bringing in Burnley players, the double, triple up on Burnley in defence. It looks like a common theme in many free hits right now. And Brighton have only had 3 goals in 7 games. So you fancy them for another clean sheet there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see Pope as well, as whilst the transfers in aren't anywhere near as big, he is the most transferred in goalkeeper as well. And I guess most of those defenders are coming in for Sionsu, who is, of course, still suspended. He's miles ahead of every other defender in terms of transfers out.
Yeah, 28,000 transfers out for Soyuncu at the moment. He's the 3rd most transferred out player right now. But the top 2 are actually Vardy and Jimenez, 37,000 transfers out for Vardy. He's had 4 returns in a row, but then he blanked. So I guess people have seen enough and they're getting rid of him, fancying a bit of Harry Kane clearly, because Vardy has United, which I guess will be a tougher fixture, but perhaps not if Harry Maguire continues his current vein of form.
Playing a centre-back he knows really well in the biggest game of his season. It's probably the biggest game that Vardy has taken part in, maybe you could say since Leicester were in the Champions League or since the league winning season. It's either of the two, but that's the sort of game he thrives in.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. I guess people are just fancying the gamble, but yeah, it might be a few punished sellers. And Jimenez have Chelsea, and yeah, they're defensively solid, aren't they? They're absolutely fantastic.
Notorious. I think I saw on Twitter just there
pieces.
that Brighton have now conceded less goals than Chelsea this season.
Otherwise, also another weird one. De Bruyne's been sold by 27,000 transfers out. I don't get what that's about as well.
It's two assists in 5.
Assist.
Yeah,
I know it's not good enough clearly for De Bruyne, but he's currently on 232 FPL points for the season, and he has Norwich at home up next. What do you really want to be selling this guy? But I guess the only explanation I can kind of think of is straight swap for Sterling. I guess people are fancying a bit of sky blue roulette, as they say. So that
roulette,
must be
maybe.
the logic behind that one.
Yeah, cool. All right, certainly makes a lot of sense. I guess if you want to fill up the space to get Kane, Jimenez, and Vardy are the sacrificial lambs for the moment. De Bruyne and Sterling. I mean, the guy just scored the 17 points, didn't he, Raheem? So yeah, people looked at De Bruyne and just gone, you know what? Since the restart, or at least in the last 5 game weeks, the returns have just not been there. So maybe that's the case to remove. I don't know. It could be quite an interesting one in the final game week. And the final game week is what we're going to talk about today. So lots of questions this week, of which we are going to integrate some of them at least into the flow, into the general chat here. Both these guys are both on free hits, as Anthony mentioned right at the start. And I think just to kind of set the scene, I've taken a little look at game week 38 in general. So I looked at 2014-15 to 2018-19, so over the last 5 seasons in terms of the averages. So the goals scored, of which home goals and away goals, and the average number of clean sheets. In terms of goals scored, there are 33.6 goals scored over the last 5 seasons on average, of which 20 were home goals, 13.6 were away goals. I could round that up if you want me to, but I'm not going to for statistical reasons. Clean sheets, 4.4. FPL review tells me that on an average game week, your home expectation is 1.55 goals and away is 1.25 goals. So there's an estimated average of 28 goals in total on a normal game week. That means that there's a 20% rise to reach the 33.6% from a 28 goal baseline, right? And that's accompanied by a drop in terms of expected clean sheets. So you'd expect maybe 5 clean sheets per game week. That drops by 12% to 4.4. Broadly, what the hell am I on about? We expect more goals. That pushes our emphasis on to attack. And what makes it really different this time round is that in most game week 38s, we've used all of our chips because we've had to navigate a very sort of complex and trying chip period. We've got the spreadsheets out, we've done it. With Project Restart, that's meant that basically, apart from that early double game week, we've kind of had to be using our chips when we can. And there are loads of people like Stag and Nick who have kind of sat there, with the free hit and thinking, well, I'm going to leave it to game week 38. That's a great time to use it because, all the teams can go off at once. Longest break, so hopefully things will be more predictable. So I guess the floor is open to you guys. In this most sort of goal-hungry, goal-friendly of weeks, how are you guys approaching your free hits? Let's start with Anthony first, the man who's on the chase. What are you doing?
Right, Tom. So I've thought about this long and hard, and I have more thinking to do. That's my full thoughts on it as we go right now.
Thoughts about
Yeah,
it.
there we go. Podcast over. Good luck. No. Okay. So I'm definitely chasing the goals, and because I guess the Burnley defense is so accessible on the cheap, tripling up on the Burnley defense and just hoping for the best there, because I think I'm about as likely to get that clean sheet out of Burnley as I am to split my chances all over the league and try and get all 4 of those clean sheets effectively. I might as well just go like, if Burnley get the clean sheet, it works. And there are so many other people going to be at least doubled up, even who aren't on free hits, that it probably won't affect me too badly. Right now, I do have Digne in there as my other defender, let's say. I'm not too sure about that. There's a question that we have there, which I'm sure we'll talk about, from Sanders Plessers, which is asking about Aurier or Digne, and that's pretty much a question that is on my mind. Going up then, it is really the City triple up is something that I think is very hard to ignore this game week. Obviously playing against Norwich, obviously in form, and I guess the Man City are trying to keep a rhythm ahead of the return of the Champions League. This is kind of their last chance to continue their rhythm, so I don't think that this is necessarily what other people would put down as a dead rubber game for them. I think this is their last chance really to fight for selection ahead of the Champions League, which is obviously quite a bit into the future still. The United recent form and I guess how they played against West Ham has really dented my overall confidence in United. And so right now in my current draft, I only have Bruno Fernandes from Manchester United, which is a little bit shocking really, but that's basically ensuring myself that if they get a penalty, I hope he takes it being the final day and him having the pretty good record, and it being a crunch penalty. I don't think they'll put it in Rashford's less certain hands, put it that way. And then up top, I do have Jamie Vardy in my team right now, in spite of all these people selling him, and Danny Ings, and then just a supplementary third who won't be playing.
Yeah, so I think in terms of my team defensively, I think we're relatively similar, as in, well, kind of half based on Tom's comments as well, in terms of there being lots of goals. One team that perhaps won't score too many goals, as we saw there, not particularly brilliant attacking against a 9-man Norwich, but what they have been is very strong defensively as Burnley. And yeah, as you said, the assets there are very cheap. The likes of Peters, the likes of Bardsley only costing you 4.3 million, 4.4 million. So currently, I'm probably looking at a triple Burnley defence with Pope in goal as well, and then a substitute goalkeeper who costs nothing, like 3.9 million, someone like Martin or Button or someone like that will do a job. And then alongside them, I'm probably going to keep Trent. My plan was always to keep Trent anyway, but based on tonight as well, it's just reinforced that belief that this guy, the 1 week I didn't own him this season, he got me 24 points. Newcastle away, he could easily smash them again and get a huge haul. I'd regret missing out on that. So I think Trent will stay. The only way he would fall out would be if I have to make some last minute tinkering, and even then it might be just to put Van Dijk in and just to save a few pennies or something like that. But yeah, for me, Trent stays. And then the other two slots probably going to be on the bench. I'm probably just going to put someone like Brandon Williams, 3.8 million, enabler, and Tanganga or something like that, just to fill up those final slots in defence. So that's probably how it's going to be in terms of the defenders. Very cheap, apart from Trent, using that triple Burnley and hoping for that triple clean sheet. In terms of the midfield and the attack, so I've actually gone for quite a premium heavy team right now. Very, very expensive 5 premium assets. It's the only chance you can get over the course of the season to do this, and I certainly won't be able to afford all of these guys at the start of next season. But I already had KDB, Bruno Fernandes and Sterling in my team. What I'm actually going to do is add Salah and Kane to that. So I've actually got all 5 of those guys. That's a lot of money invested in 5 guys, but it's pretty effective the way it works out, because I can still keep Trent. I can still have 3 Burnley players, but then the other 2 players that I'm going to have in my team will be very cheap enablers like Foden and Greenwood. And that can be my 11, basically. And then the bench will be full of those super cheap assets like Tanganga and Brandon Williams. And I've actually still got money for an extra forward slot, which goes all the way up to DCL in terms of value.
Oh,
so,
no.
So DCL can sit there on the bench. And if there's some real screw up with the team sheets or something, if there's any information and someone doesn't play, then he can come on. He's got Bournemouth, he scored 13 goals. He can do a job at least. But, I'm probably going to play Greenwood over him anyway and still have Calvert-Lewin in case I need to call on that bench for whatever reason. I've got that backup there. Yeah. So plenty of money and I can still get all of those 5 guys. So I'm quite happy with that setup generally.
Investing in 5 guys. It sounds like you've kind of
burger chain going.
Yeah.
It's just subliminal advertising that we've incorporated into the pod.
Subliminal needs. I need a 5 guys right now. Right. Okay. No, interesting. So it sounds like you're both broadly kind of structured in a similar way. It sounds like with Nick, you've got your Burnley and you've got Trent, and it sounds like you've got Luke Dean to start with the defence at least. Sanders Plesser's asked Aurier or Digne, and the Derry Cracker said he's looking into defence and he's left with Sice, and he's got a couple of defenders. What to do with him? Maybe that'll be one I'll talk about when I talk about what I'm doing with my team later on. But in terms of kind of the Sanders Blesser's question and what the hell else is going on with defenders, I think broadly it makes sense to go with those Burnley players. I'm not going to talk about the goalkeepers because that's boring. I assume you've got Pope or some other kind of concoction there. But we think with Pope, the clean sheet is going to be fought for by Burnley, isn't it? I mean, and Plong, Bards, Peters, Tarko, they're all in contention, aren't they? I mean, Tarko, he's up to 5.4 after a late season firestorm of purchasing, but he smashed it on DPS and he's earned 41 points actually since the restart. Only Matt D 50, Johnny 49, and Richie 43 have done better of the defenders. So yeah, doing pretty well. I just wanted to note as well, when I was looking through the data to see if there's anyone else I could pull out, the highest XG for defenders is Michael Craig Dawson, of all people. He's got 1.66 XG, according to Hub.
It's so tempting against Arsenal. Oh, my God.
Are you going to play him then, Tom?
I'm probably going to play him, yeah. But he's got higher XG than the likes of Jack Grealish, Harvey Barnes, and Mason Greenwood, which probably shows the fallacy of XG, maybe. But he's also had the most shots, 16 of all defenders, and most shots in the box from any defender, 15. That 15 shots in the box, by the way, is equal to Jimenez and above the likes of Harry Kane, Riyad Mahrez, and before this game week, Pulisic. He's also top of headed attempts for all players. He's had 11 headed attempts since the restart. And Arsenal have conceded equal 4 shots in the box of all teams since the restart. Just saying. But yeah, a very interesting kind of set of individuals. But just to take Sanders Plesser's question and maybe to expand on your Digne pick, Anthony, why have you gone there? Is it because of Bournemouth? Is it just because of the creative flair of the man himself? Why have you decided to go with our man Luca?
Yeah, like look, Luca Dean, he's no Dawson, but he is still in the top 5 defenders in terms of shots, and he's also right up there in that kind of top 5, top 10-ish bracket in terms of chances created. So there is, as we well know, always the chance of an attacking return from Digne. Couple that, I guess, with the fact that it is Bournemouth and Everton have. Like, they're not particularly good in attack at all, but defensively they haven't been terrible post the restart. So I just kind of felt as a punt, he kind of felt like a good one. But the more I think about it, the less comfortable I am with it. And I would say of all players, he's probably the least likely to stay. And I think Trent's Hall has actually freaked me out a little bit as well, if I'm honest. I have no Liverpool players currently in my team, and they play Newcastle. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I'm not saying that Trent is like coverage for all of that front three and all of those midfielders and all those other defenders, but at least it's something. And on a day like today, when he does, return 2 attacking returns and, still hits double figures as a defender, even though they conceded 3 times, yeah, it's kind of hard to ignore him.
Well, looking at my television right now, you may not need to worry because it looks like they're getting pissed again. So it's probably going to be another mauling. So maybe get Joe Linton or your man Andy Carroll.
This is probably an important time actually to come in with that, Nick. So last night, I'm studying at the moment, folks. Tom, I need to get it out, okay? I'm studying at the moment, so maybe a little bit delirious. So take this with a pinch of salt, everybody. But I had a dream, all right? And in this dream, I owned Andy Carroll. You know when you know something in a dream? Like it, that there's some, you already have this like prior knowledge, but you don't know how you acquired it. Well, I had the knowledge that I already owned Andy Carroll and he'd already scored once. And then it's in the dream, Alisson spills the ball out, very specific, and Andy Carroll pokes in a second.
Sounds like you're the Martin Luther King of FPL.
If it comes true, then people are going to be coming for you for Premiership years.
Yeah, it's like I've got 6 random numbers for you as well, guys. But there you go. That's the.
I had a dream that Andy Carroll was poking in a rebound from Alisson, and I dreamt and saw. Sorry,
not quite Martin Luther King. No.
I get it. Interesting. And Nick, I guess with Trent, he's probably getting pissed tonight, but I guess the value reality is something that you're sticking to, huh?
Yeah, I think so. He's been in the team. He's done a solid job. I'm not one to get rid of my players easily. So if he's there already, I'm happy with him. And he's he's broken 200 points again this season. Just been fantastic. His assist record is phenomenal. This player has been absolutely brilliant for the last 2 campaigns. And I can't get rid of him, especially with Newcastle. A good chance of another clean sheet there. A good chance of attacking returns. He's not going to be leaving my team. But in regards to the questions from Derry Cracker and Sanders Plessers, I think personally between Aurier and Dean, I'd say Aurier, but just because of the money it saves you, just that extra million can go further in terms of your investment in the midfield and attack. That's where the value seems to be right now. And I think Dean, Aurier has kind of matched Dean in terms of the chance creations. He's only 1 assist behind him for this season, but I think with both players, just don't expect a clean sheet is what I would probably say, because you'll invariably be let down. It'll be like a late Callum Wilson goal or something, and Dean will get a yellow card and you'd just be peeved off. So just expect the unexpected with Luca Dean. He can either get you 15 points or 1 point. He's definitely one of those players. And final game week might well be that 15 points.
Can I jump in on you there, actually, just when you're talking about Aurier quickly? Like, Palace, in fairness, have absolutely nothing to play for. And they're one of the most on-the-beach teams that you'll find in the league right now. Bournemouth, of course, have absolutely everything to play for. Palace have only scored twice in the last 5. They've only created 4 big chances in that time.
Lost on the trot, right?
Yeah, and Spurs have 3 clean sheets in their last 5. Aurier, okay, over the course of a season, he's not too far behind Digne, but since I've just had a look at the stats, like since the restart, he's effectively anonymous in terms of chance creation and attacking threat in general. But he is, I guess, from a bonus's point of view, etc., pretty good for Spurs. So they look like a much better clean sheet potential than Everton. Like, the more I think about it, the Digne pick is probably not a good idea. Basically,
I think it's worth a punt. It's final game week, isn't it? It's all about those punts. So perhaps go for it if you've got the money to spare. But if you haven't got the money, then it's a decent downgrade. The only other player I thought about, quite an interesting option, depends about your City assets again. But Garcia's only 4.5 million for Manchester City. might be an easy way to a clean sheet there if you're fancying a cheap investment there. Or I don't know what you think about the Arsenal assets as well, Tom. Perhaps if you're fancying real risk, someone like Kieran Tierney.
Yeah,
maybe.
Kieran Tierney, I think maybe. Yeah, no, he definitely getting in the crosses, isn't he? Very aggressive, getting up and down that flank, and I think he's actually doing something with the in terms of end product. For a clash, actually, he's just booted off the pitch. Stacks just written David Luiz's pile driver is due. I'm not too sure about that. Probably pile driver to his own net. I do like Tierney if you are going to be punting like that. I agree on Palace, and we'll probably get there in terms of the midfield, in terms of the attackers, in terms of Spurs and how they may be featuring a lot of these sort of squads. Without further ado, maybe we do talk about midfielders, because I mean, you guys have both got, I think, maybe slightly similar sort of setups as well, as I've mentioned. So Bruno only, but quite a kind of heavy cast of characters with KDB, Raheem Sterling, and Salah in this midfield. Couple of questions here. So El Nino, Raja RM28, he asked who the best midfielder around kind of 7 million, 7.5 million is. So that's a price bracket that you guys completely avoid. And FPL Yuval asked if we should considering Mahrez. So, you know, he didn't start the last game week, and it may be considered that he gets to go against Norwich. It's very difficult to kind of pick and choose with Pep. And we'll talk about the league in just a minute, because we've got to kind of address that. But yeah, so midfield-wise, guys, I mean, Nick, it kind of makes sense to me that you're going kind of full pelt with that high-powered midfield plus Foden. I mean, if Foden doesn't play, do you have a backup plan? What are you going to do there?
So I haven't really fully formulated the backup plan. I'd probably look to bring in someone like David Silva and finding the funds to get him in, because I do want to be tripled up in Manchester City for that final game week, and I just have to look to downgrade Calvert-Lewin to someone dirt cheap, perhaps. But that's depending if we get some early team news, and that's not necessarily the case. But that's what I'd probably do, is just take the money out of Calvert-Lewin, take the money out somewhere else, and just look for someone like Silva. But in terms of the, I will have a little bit of a play around to kind of finalise that secondary plan B as well. So I'm not kind of panicking at last minute. But in terms of the 7 million around the assets, I had a little think about this question. I actually started looking at the West Ham assets. Actually, they started to perform pretty well. Antonio's the obvious one there at 7.1 million. He was just outside the top 5 for the market forces, but since the restart, he's just been excellent, hasn't he? With 8 goals to his name, 28 goal attempts, which is the most out of all midfielders, apart from perhaps Salah. And now he seems to be on penalties, with Noble having given up duties to kind of help Antonio boost his goal scoring record even further. But if money's too tight for him, there was a couple other West Ham assets that caught my eye. Bowen at 6.4 million. Looked pretty decent, scored loads of goals in the Championship earlier on in the season. And even cheaper, there was Thomas Souček, 4.8 million, who's looked pretty dangerous with 18 goal attempts since the start of the restart. And that's in the top 10 for midfielders, and 14 of those attempts have been inside the box. A bit like Michael Dawson, like Craig Dawson. He's just a giant guy, and he's a real threat on those set pieces. He's got 3 goals to his name since the restart. So, yeah, a bit of a dangerous threat there.
He does had more headed attempts than any other midfielder. Tommy Souček, 7. That's equal to Giroud and Dominic Calvert-Lewin as well, and second only to Michael/Craig in inverted commas Dawson,
and not Matt.
Definitely not Matt Dawson. Who's he? He was a rugby guy, right?
The England scrum half.
Right, okay. Well. Different sport entirely. God, it's definitely doing well on the line out. So, yeah, I mean, Souček, let's start riffing on these sorts of characters. And also Adam Pritchard mentioned the fact that he's looking out for sexy punts like Trossard. I did have a look at Trossard himself. He's 5th for shots in the box since the restart, and he's also a player that Adam should be signing ASAP. Outside of that, I mean, you guys have got probably the optimal sorts of players, but I mean, Trezeguet, one who's doing okay. He's 4th for XG amongst midfielders over the last couple of game weeks. A 5th, 5 for shots on target, same as Son.
Yeah, but 3 goals in 3 games as well for El Trez, so he kind of stands out there. And I guess if you want to go for the more expensive but underperforming FPL-wise compatriot of his, Grealish is there as well, 5.9.
Oh yeah, but his stats are just dire, really.
Big man for the big occasion, though.
Yeah,
like the one thing about West Ham is that they're safe now. 4 points clear, 1 game to go. Aston Villa aren't.
Trezeguet's got a name to live up to, you know. And the other one to mention, and I think maybe this looks at El Nino's question, but a 7.0, one that I really like is Lucas Moura. So the last couple of game weeks, he's actually second for XA amongst midfielders. Last couple of games, Mourinho hasn't been rotated in that team, as is his want normally. And Palace have been absolutely dreadful, as we've spoken about before. They've conceded the most big chances of any team, equal first, that is. But yeah, I mean, Mahrez, he was mentioned by FPL Yuval as one that we should be considering. He's the ninth highest scoring mid since the restart. And we'll mention this a bit more later as well in terms of a question, but he's one of those players who, if he starts, he is on for a double figure sort of return. So Nick, you're someone along with Neil Murray who's always singing Mahrez's praises, but it sounds like you're getting rid of him as part of your free hit. Why are you dispensing with the Algerian Maestro services now?
It's mainly because I just want to get Salah and Kane in. So unfortunately, Mahrez is one of the fall guys part of that plan, alongside Marcus Rashford. And it's just a kind of case of I really want Sterling and De Bruyne. They're the key men for City for me. Mahrez is the third man, and he's been doing my head in as well because you keep getting 1 pointers from him. So it was pretty good when we restarted. I think he got like a massive haul, 17 points. But in the last few weeks, it's a couple of 1 pointers last couple of game weeks. There's 6 points before that. It's just been a bit of a frustrating hold over the past 5 game weeks. So it's 3 1s in 5 games essentially, and no double figure hauls. So that's perhaps just my own personal experiences that he's wound me up a little bit there. And I'm just like seeing Foden, and Foden's been playing really, really well, and he's about 3 million cheaper. So getting in Foden saves me a lot of money, and it allows me to upgrade Pulisic, who I'm also a bit concerned about selling now after that brilliant subs performance, to Salah as part of a bigger move.
Yeah, so I also have Riyad Mahrez, but I actually have him in my free hit team as it stands right now, and he'll be staying there. And of course, that's kind of caveat, pep roulette, caveat. But given that he played 13 minutes against Bournemouth and 26 minutes against Watford all season, it seems that 2 substitute appearances tend to mean starting the game after and playing 60. There's only one exception to that in the pattern this year. Like, you can read into pep roulette all you want, but that's what I'm doing. And he's 30 mins per chance effectively since the restart in game week 30, which is, that's pretty solid going as well for a midfielder. He is explosive, and I guess as somebody who's chasing, he's I think someone that I probably should get in on the balance of things. I'm just not that interested in Phil Foden either, to be honest. Of course, there are team leaks going around at the moment, and hopefully there will be some information about the City team leak ahead of those games. I'll be sitting there ready to go to try and make sure that I have the right City midfielders in my team, because this could all be thrown out if somehow Gundogan is starting striker. I'll be like, oh God, he's in.
I think it's one of those moments of kind of bizarre unity amongst the remaining playing core, but there's going to be at least almost 200,000 people all sat there at 2:45 on Sunday going, not now, go away, I'm busy, leave me alone. I think in regards to the leaking, I think we need to acknowledge that it is going on. If you aren't on Twitter, you should probably know that it's going on. There's an account called FPL Scarface. I was a bit sceptical about them at first, but the lad has gone beyond guessing now. I think the first time I was like, he's probably just guessing. Second time I was like, okay, maybe he's got unlucky, maybe he's got it. But I think he started to pull out a few calls that were too specific. But I mean, that kind of leads to the point that any assertion we're making here is going to be pretty much faceted by the fact that if that guy or any sort of leak turns around and says the City team's actually going to look like this, then things just go out the window. So if KDB gets benched, I mean, suddenly my entire team changes, my transfer plans change. I'll talk about them in a little bit. And for these guys as well, the free hit. I mean, Nick, Stag, how many teams do you have ready to go? I mean, Nick, you were saying on the Slack earlier, you've got about five scenarios you're planning for or something like that.
Yeah, I just don't want to over panic on the day. So if I see the City, it's mostly the City lineup, that's going to be the big one really, because I think the other players we generally know are going to start, and unless there's some big shocks, it's mostly just if Foden's not playing, then I'll have to set up a secondary team. probably with David Silva, and I'll just do a few swaps around and change a few personnel. No major changes. I don't want to be in a situation where I'm making major changes 10 minutes before the deadline, but I just want to have all my ducks in a row in terms of what I'm doing. And so I'm ready and prepared, really, rather than some sort of last minute panic thinking, one of my players isn't playing, what do I do? I want to know and have my ready-made replacement, or whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 changes that have to be done to accommodate that. It just makes the weekend and Sunday a lot calmer rather than some sort of panic before the deadline.
It is going to be carnage, though, I guess. Like, we don't know if there will be leaks ever, but we also don't know how many leaks there will be. Of course, it's the only game week of the season as well, where every game kicks off at the same time. So there's scope for a complete and utter mind-numbing 15 or 20 or 10 or 3 minutes of confusion trying to sort out teams. I personally don't have a load of teams set up. I'm going to just be confident in my research and my thoughts by the time, when we get there. I will just let my heart and my brain guide me to whatever happens, and just hope that my phone doesn't run out of battery or break at some random point as I'm trying to set up the team, because there's a cracked screen and it is showing signs of potentially doing that at some point.
Hope the site stays up, etc., etc., etc. But I think it will be all right. It won't be like game week 1 where there's 7 million people or so trying to play. I think it'll just be a load of us nerds who are the people left over who are trying to be getting in, right? And the final position to talk about, we haven't spoken about before that digression, is the strikers. Lots of interest, as Nick mentioned, the market forces in the likes of Kane, and also Aubameyang as well is a feature on a few people's radars. So Angus McNeil, for example, asked if Aubameyang, or maybe an Arsenal for like Lacazette, is worth bringing in for this game week. Sanket asked if Ings or Jimenez should be sold for Kane. Looks like Jimenez is being the main kind of fall guy for Harry Kane. FPL MPEG asked for the best Vardy replacement, which is quite interesting because Stag, you're keeping Vardy. And Matt at Leafy Dragon FPL asked if Jesus is worth buying in. So quite a few interesting things there, especially actually, and also a late riser asked, who do you like in the cheapest striker slots below 6.5 million? Nick's already given his seal of approval to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I've got to show up for the books, really. But to take the Kane questions and the Aubameyang questions first, if I was free hitting, I think it goes without saying that a lot of the time we like parodying Harry Kane, and I like parodying Harry Kane as an Arsenal fan. But the reality is that if he does turn it around and is a good FPL asset again, I'm going to be all over him. Doesn't really matter. But Kane's XG is 4.8 actually since the restart. That's highest for strikers, and it's 4th overall behind the likes of Antonio, Salah, and Sterling. Compared to him, Aubameyang is in the I don't know category. I think he's been fielded in all sorts of places by Mikel Arteta. He's got 24 shots, 17 in the box, and next year 3.55. That's equal to Ings, who outscores him on the Raws. So 23 shots, of which 20 were in the box, so a higher proportion in the box. Between those two, I think I'd be going for Kane, and I know that you guys probably are both in that camp, right?
My original plan was Aubameyang actually over Kane, I think, and that kind of changed. Just watching the games this weekend, we did see that old Kane against Leicester, and I know, as we said, we've been taking the mickey a little bit, but I think in terms of 1 week on, I can't fault it. I think with Arsenal, I think perhaps they've got one eye on the FA Cup, and they'll be facing a Watford team. Are they facing Watford? Yeah, they are. They'll be facing a Watford team that are going to be fighting for their life. So it's going to be a really hard-fought team. And as we said earlier, Crystal Palace have been on the beach for ages. They've looked absolutely rubbish since the restart and not really playing. So I think I probably prefer Spurs' fixture, and with Arsenal probably focusing on the FA Cup and playing with the harder fixture, perhaps. That's my main reason. And I think in terms of the underlying stats, I had a quick look between the two of them. They're pretty similar. I mean, Kane and Aubameyang both have had 24 goal attempts since the restart, though Aubameyang's had played an extra game. In terms of the big chances, though, Kane's actually had 9 compared to Aubameyang's 4, and he's scored more goals than Aubameyang as well since the restart. So I think between the two, it feels like I've got back the Spurs guy here.
Yeah, look, likewise for me, it's just you have that combination of form and fixtures when it comes to Kane, and I'm just not confident in Aubameyang as it stands. Like, of course, and I think I even said it on last week's pod, that like there is always the chance with Aubameyang that he will go and score a brace, but just Kane has the fixture, as you say, compared to Aubameyang. Like that Watford team are going to be difficult. They have everything to play for. Palace have been torrid. it's just a no-brainer for me on that one. And I guess it's maybe to answer Angus McNeil's question and moving off, and then moving off to Sanket's question, which is asking about selling Ings or Jimenez to make that transfer. Like it's Jimenez that I'm selling for sure. I've actually never owned Ings all this season. You might say, wow, Stag, no wonder you're in the outside the top 500,000. Yes, dear listener, that's why, because Danny Ings is that good. Like he's a player now who's 2 goals off the Golden Boot, and Sheffield officially have nothing to play for, which is the first time we could say that all year now, going into the final day. So Ings is actually in my free hit team right now as the third striker, potentially actually playing, depending on how I set myself up in the end. Otherwise I might use that money to move someone like Ducadine to Trent. But you could see Danny Ings yet again netting a brace, even a hat-trick on the final day, and it would be lovely to for once be the person who's tweeting "Dings" as opposed to just going, "Oh my god, not again!"
Disappearing from Twitter as soon as Danny Ings scores. Yeah, I know that feeling all too well. I think I owned him during his only dry patch of the season. I haven't owned him for his fertile period. So there you go. That totally makes sense. I mean, Jimenez, mere data basically. But he's post-Manning. I mean, since I sold him a couple of weeks ago, he's not stopped just lucking his way to 8 or 9 points every game week. It's obviously it's not luck, but it is just kind of a sense of being able to tick over, which is going to make him very valuable at the start of next year, I think, to a lot of people. DCL, I did mention him jovially, and I saw Late Riser did mention him in a chat elsewhere. But his XG is actually 2.5, and he scored no goals. He's also joint 4th with Jesus and Jimenez for shots from target since the restart. Incredibly. So, Pontius Maximus against Bournemouth, perhaps. And there's a couple of other examples I've seen moose in the community I just want to call out the stats wizardry or the stats sophistry on. So, Troy Deeney, I've seen a couple of people underlying his case due to the cojones versus Arsenal. Safe to say, he's not actually been great against us in the past. He's been missing penalties. I owned him for that missed penalty. And he's actually recorded 2 wins and 6 losses against us, only 2 goals and 1 red card. His XG is 2.65 since the restart, of which 1.5 XG is penalties. And he's had 2 penalties, 0.75 XG, which means he's got 1.15 XG in reality, which is basically Bernardo Silva or Firmino before tonight in range. So, yeah, I shouldn't be rushing towards him. And finally, I've seen Solanke, of all people, has been vaunted by a couple, and that's just the case of stats bending, basically. He's got more big chances per appearance than Mahrez and Aubameyang, but I'm bending the data there to suit my narrative. If you look at the stats in total, he's definitely not worth it. But maybe
if you watch a game of football.
Yeah, but maybe there's something in the likes of Josh King, maybe, or is there any kind of Stanislas at Bournemouth? I mean, there could definitely be something there. I don't know.
I like the Troy Deeney call. It is that cojones type thing, though, isn't it? Like,
maybe
a few goals in the last few weeks. He is Mr. Watford. He seems to be over that knee injury, which was a bit of an issue there. Obviously, the penalty taker, everything to play for. It's Arsenal, who, as you say, might have one eye on the FA Cup, but anyway, it's Arsenal, and I would fancy between Deeney and big man Dawson, there could be a goal or two there.
I hope so. But I mean, Deeney was coming out and saying that they're all united, they're all together, and they're all going to absolutely smash it against City and put in a committed performance. And they did not do that. They looked like they were beaten from the moment they walked on. So there you go.
Yeah, no, some good points there. I mean, going back to sort of FPL MPEG's question about the best Vardy replacement and Leave Dragon talking about Jesus. So I know you're a Jesus owner, Tom, but I found it quite interesting actually, a post from XG Philosopher that said that Jesus was second in the XG Golden Boot this season behind only Salah with an XG of 20.08, but only having scored 13 goals. And I think that's kind of like highlights some of the flaws perhaps of XG, that it's not a fallible source of data.
The flaws of XG or the flaws of Jesus?
Well, a bit of both, really, because I think the problem is with Jesus, anyone who's seen him play knows that with City, you get plenty of chances to score. If you're the centre forward for City, you can have plenty of chances to score, for sure. But every time he does, he tends to scuff his lines and hit it straight at the keeper. I think Tom described him on one of the other pods as the premium Dominic Calvert-Lewin or something along those lines. But yes, I think But I think ultimately, though, he is playing, with all negative comments aside, this guy is playing Norwich at home. So if you own him, certainly don't sell him for that. In terms of actually purchasing Jesus, I think with free, especially if you're on a free hit or something, with free slots for City available, I wouldn't put him in the top 4 or 5. I'd probably put De Bruyne, Sterling, Mahrez, David Silva, maybe, and Foden ahead of him. So I think ultimately there are better assets at City than spending 9.9 million on Jesus, especially because we just talked about some other forwards, which I think would be better picks for this game week.
And can I pick a bone with FPL MPEG as well, talking about selling Vardy? Like, why are you selling him? 4 goals in 5 games, season-defining game, as I said. United are on the wane, it seems. It's against Harry Maguire. I know we said all this earlier in the pod, but I just want to emphasise it. And since the restart, 3rd for XG, 3rd for shots in the box. He's kind of crept up there into the stats, having being quite poor early on. He just kind of seems like one of these players that destiny kind of just seems to align itself for over and over again over the last however many years we've got used to him in the Premier League, and this seems like just one of those moments.
Yeah, destiny is calling me. Maybe Vardy is Mr. Brightside. Okay, so you guys are both from free hits. I'm not. So a final kind of little monologue here. Chris Laws asked me, what are your thoughts on taking a hit on the final game week as a -4 or a -8, kind of worth it? As someone who's not on free hit, and the fact that I think it's like 35% of the top 10k, it shouldn't matter to me, I don't think, after this game week's outcome, but it's worth mentioning, are on free hit, and most of the engaged player base, I think it's going to be probably about a 30-70 split. I'm really reluctant basically to take a hit into this game week, because basically I'm giving the abundance of free hits, especially my mini league, a goal basically. So one impactful way of framing taking a hit this game week is that I'm basically handing my mini league rivals a 3 goals head start. Is that worth doing? Probably not. The only thing that could pique my interest, as we've mentioned a few times, is if there's a City team sheet which shows that I have 0 or 1 City starting, then it probably makes sense to take -4, because that is actually -2, or even take -8 because that becomes -4. Nah, again, probably not worth it. Maybe I'd take -4 max. But basically, you've got to be hoping that legacy picks like Pulisic, well, I wrote that note before tonight, and Chris Wood are ignored by those free hitting and punished on the final day. But yeah, we're up against it really if not free hitting, because you can optimize so much better with a free hit, as in any game week that you free hit. It's just because there's no recourse after this, it can be quite a difficult one. But I think overall, as we've seen, there are huge swings left, right, and centre with how everything is going at the moment. And it may be the week the free hitters work out. It may be the week the legacy keepers work out. You just don't know. I just keep an eye out on what's going on with the team league for Man City in particular, and try to make sensible picks that you're happy with, no matter how you're doing your teams. And we'll talk about kind of our, obviously our captains later on. I'll talk about my transfers then later on as well. All right, let's take a break there and move on to mini league and questions after this.
Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
So we're back, and let's catch up with the Who Got the Assist mini league. Stag, you've got the numbers. What's happening as we approach the final game week of the season?
Yeah, so not a huge amount of movement, I wouldn't say. Sean B is up from 12th to 10th. His team, never forget, scored 75 points this week. Salah captaincy, a wee bit of a disappointment for him. Adi Mansour also captained Salah. He's up from 11th to 9th with 78 points, so strong going there. Graham Wilshaw he's gone up from 9th to 7th, but he actually wildcarded now, which is an interesting time to wildcard, to say the least. He'll be pretty disappointed with the Rashford captaincy, but it didn't stop him getting 75 points, which is still extremely respectable this week. Down from 5th to 7th is Jake Gallagher, his team Sheffield Wednesday, 66 points this week. Captain Mane, so he got a little bit out of that, but 66 was probably a little bit low given the rest of the top 10. Neil Thompson, he's up from 8th to 6th. His team, Venky's out, 77 points. Martial captaincy, like me, frustrated, but otherwise pretty solid going. MJ is down from 5th to, he's down to 5th from 3rd. His team, the Cop, scored 74 points. He captained Salah. Martin Jansen holds 4th. His team, no enough, 76 points. Martial captain. Alex Coates is the big riser in the top 10 this week. He's up from 6th to 2nd with his team, Holler At Me, 91 points in spite of captaining Chris Wood. Now, I might say in spite, he did actually return, so he got his 7 points doubled there, which is, I guess, better than us Martial people can speak for. But he also had Pope, Aurier, Alexander-Arnold, Doherty, Tony Martial, He had De Bruyne, he did indeed have Sterling as well, and he had that Greenwood 9-pointer, so that's driven him on nicely. The top two is unchanged. Adam Warner, Berry 94, 67 points. Captain Salah, bit of a disappointing one for him, I guess, overall, but he's still up there at the top. And Nathan Wollaston is top still with the Woolly Ones, 78 points this week, kind of keeping him ticking over nicely, even though he captained Martial, Pope, Alexander-Arnold, Doherty, Wan-Bissaka, De Bruyne, Son, Martial, Fernandes, Sterling obviously in there, Nketiah and Danny Ings. So not too bad going there. Keep at it, guys. One more week left.
Yeah, one more week left indeed. Well done, everybody. All right, moving on to the questions then. As I said, we've peppered a few in up top, and these are kind of the outstanding few. There's still a City question, maybe two in here, but hopefully the rest of them are going to be something a little bit different at least. So the first one is flying high one game week, shot down the next. Tom Campbell says, hi all. Hi Tom. Looking
Tom.
forward to the final question. Looking forward to the final pod, mates. This is obviously written to me, so I've slightly rejigged it. And thanks to Tom and Nick and Anthony for all of the pods this season. Thanks, dude. My question is,
no problem, Tom.
My question is, do you guys think the highs still outweigh the lows when playing FPL, or does that depend on how well you've been doing in terms of your overall rank? So yeah, quite an interesting one. I think maybe a bit more of an esoteric one about kind of the nature of FPL and how it impacts us. Probably a bad time to ask me because I've just had an absolute dog poo of a game week. But I think it does all depend on OR to me to some extent. But I think getting a getting a tiny violin out and doing this means there's a magnification of an extra sort of 50% or something on how well you're doing. It's gotten better for me over the years in terms of not letting the lows affect me as much as they used to and ruin weekends as much as they used to. I guess it's things that, like what we shared in the outcome pods, the way of reframing the question. So I'm happy with the decision I made. Those things are really important. And I guess all those things designed as contributions to help managers absorb the lows and find kind of peace of mind, especially in a high variance game, which at times can fetishize a rank and have a sense of sneering elitism, I suppose. The lows do hurt in short, but not as much. And I've kind of gotten to the point now after 3 years of doing this where I just laugh at the randomness, but still take the time to assess my decisions, which I'll do at the end of the season. The bench boost I mentioned earlier on was great. And I made sure to enjoy those moments because they're very fleeting. And sometimes you do have the negatives, which you just got to roll with and laugh at. And that's kind of the way it is, really. So in answer to Tom's question, I guess, I think the highs, you've got to relish them. You've got to really think about the way in which you do savor them and do appreciate them, because that kind of accounts for the lows, as it were. And you've got to hope you get more highs and lows over the course of the season, too. What do you guys reckon?
It is a mixed bag. You have lots of highs, as you all know. You have lots of lows as well. And I'd like to say those highs definitely sort of outweigh the lows. Otherwise, it would defeat the object of playing. If you're finding that you're playing FPL and you're having so many lows and not too many highs, then I would suggest perhaps to try and take a break maybe and just have a little bit of a breather before you play again. But ultimately, I think it's not just about the game weeks. It's about the planning, the preparation, picking your team, tinkering with your team. That's part of the high as well, part of the fun as well. And it's all sort of like the gambling side, let's say, as well, sort of experimenting with those setups and before you see if those gambles pay off. And many times they do, often they don't as well. And I think there's a high in that just in general. And it's a safe high as well. No money being gambled when you're in truth with FPL compared to sort of like betting websites. There's no risk to livelihood. It's just for the enjoyment and ultimately the collection of virtual points, which we all like to collect. So I think ultimately it is more highs than lows, partly because just part of the fun is talking about FPL, talking about setups, planning for the game week, and when the game week goes badly, we move on quickly and start thinking about the next game week most of the time as well. So more highs than lows for me.
I was thinking about this, and I was hoping, or maybe wondering, if one of you guys were going to kind of say that, because I think what Tom's question hints at is that maybe the highs have become less frequent than the lows over time for FPL players, or something like that. That maybe the game has become, is that because the game has become harder, or whether that's because just maybe we're all more frustrated and polarized as individuals, or whatever it may be. But it's interesting, neither of you came at it that way, and I wouldn't either. Like, even as someone who's had an awful lot of lows in an FPL sense this season. I guess I've maybe taken solace in what FPL does for me, which is, it's an extra area of interest for me in a game I enjoy watching and following in far too much detail and enjoy talking about far too much to the, to driving other people demented around me in real life, talking about it kind of constantly and using football as my frame of reference for pretty much almost everything is not a healthy thing. But it's great when I've got however many people on Twitter nattering back and forth and Slack chats, etc., to bounce off and see people who kind of have a similar approach to things. And I think maybe that's why there are highs in FPL, even when you're having a low season, if we put it that way. But maybe from a more FPL centric perspective, I think when I was doing better, and I think since I've had a Twitter account, I've done poorly, by, let's say, what FPL Twitter would, or the subreddit would consider good. I've done poorly pretty much every season. I think I've only had one top 100k finish since I bloody launched FPL Stag. 2 top 100ks? I can't even remember. It's, basically I haven't been anywhere even near the top 10k come the end of the season since I launched an account. And that's kind of, I guess, something that all of us would aim for when we start a season at minimum. And there were stages when I used to be demented by, oh no, I'd look at the top 10k average or the top 1k average in the middle over towards the end of a weekend, and you just feel crap because, oh, that decision went wrong or whatever. And I think slowly, and maybe this is just an emotional maturity thing as well, I've just frankly, I'm just nowhere near as affected by it anymore. And that's probably a good thing. And maybe years of mediocrity and bad ranks have inoculated me against the effects of it. And maybe just because, this has been the weirdest season ever, it has been sad to miss out on a lot of the more, let's say, extracurricular FPL stuff, like the little events and things. I've tended to kind of catch up with people once, twice, 3 times a season. I was fortunate enough to catch a few guys in New York in game week 1, just in time to see Sterling break my heart for the first time this season when he scored however many zillion points on game week 1. I think it was a 20-pointer with a hat-trick against West Ham on game week 1. But that was the only time, I guess, that I've been able to enjoy that this season, just because of other commitments in life, etc. And it's sad that, I guess, with the Irish meetup had to be cancelled. I wasn't going to be going to it, but I know quite a lot of listeners were going to be, and other things like that aren't going ahead, and hopefully they will be able to go ahead come at game week 1 or at least the autumn.
Yeah, no, certainly. Even those getting people together sort of things are huge byproducts of all of this. I was due to be going to Ireland as well. It's a shame I couldn't do it, and I hope people do that again in the future. But yeah, all of these things are definitely, things that I guess are extraneous to FPL, but also are a lot more important, paradoxically, than the game itself. To basically everybody who's part of it, as Sam said, having somebody to natter back at you is really important, and you'll find no shortage of that looking at FPL Twitter, that's for sure. Right. Next thing, Pep Roulette lessons, or Sky Blue Roulette lessons, as Nick would call it. So Karam Tizer asks, what lessons did we learn with Pep Roulette this season? 3 of the top 6 scorers midfielder from Man City, yet we've always been reluctant to get on the likes of Mahrez because of game time fear. So do we demolish the idea of saying he might be benched, I'm not going to buy him, and replace that with, is he reliable and explosive? I think maybe reliable is a bit of a relative term in terms of Pep, but explosive, yeah, definitely worth talking about. What do you guys think? Is it definitely worth looking apart from this, especially with that kind of 5 sub rule which could be brought in by the Premier League? Does it all hinge on that, whether we reframe whether the likes of Mahrez are worth buying next season?
So I had a bit of a think about this, and had a quick look just through this season's Premier League data really quickly, and Sterling and Mahrez scored a goal each off the bench this season. And Lord knows they've both come off the bench quite a few times, obviously more so for Mahrez than for Sterling. But I guess the 5 sub rule isn't necessarily something that we need to be getting excited about. Of course, it'll make Pep Roulette sharper, and maybe it'll be a little bit more forgiving than usual. But you could also take it from the point of view of, oh, well, everyone's going to surely get a half an hour versus the, well, how many players are even going to get the 2 points for playing 60 minutes consistently. And so I think it's going to come as a double-edged sword for us, the 5 subs rule. But is there anything we can learn from Pep Roulette overall? No. We've been dealing with Pep for years, and it's just grown more and more frustrating. There's going to be some person who's going to come in over the summer, presumably to replace Leroy Sané, who thankfully hasn't been a facet of Pep Roulette this year, but there's going to be a replacement for him who's going to be causing the same consternation. And I guess yes, Foden has now, replaced Silva properly, but
Yeah.
Bernardo Silva is surely going to return. He was player of the season for City last year, been pretty poor and pretty ineffectual this year, but I can't imagine that will continue. He's probably just exhausted. But even like someone like Sterling, like it's easy for us to look back and say, oh, he was brilliant. But Tom, you'll be able to tell me who it was. But one of the guys on Twitter had a great point that, okay, Sterling got his game week 1 hattie. That was 20 points. And he's at 196 points in the 8 game week since the game came back. That's half of all his points for the whole entire bloody season. So it's like you could be saying, oh, he's dependable and so reliable and he scored so many points and on a points per game basis. But the fact of the matter is that for like a good solid half of this season, or more, he was driving you nuts.
Yeah,
driving you
nuts,
nuts,
wasn't he? Jones was nuts. That was FPL crate digger, that one. But yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think as well that the 5 subs is going to be the anchor here, and will that be introduced in the Premier League? So my way of kind of attacking this question was looking at it from a value point of view, rather than the Pep Roulette point of view to some extent, because the Pep Roulette is kind of like an underlying truism that's always going to be there. We're always going to be kind of dealing with the fact that the Mad Catalan is going to be messing players around in left, right, and centre, depending on the algo or whatever. You've got the likes of Bilver, as Stag mentioned, who are probably going to come back. I doubt he's going to be gotten rid of, and Pep rates him highly. He's had a bad season, but next year, who knows? He could be the guy who sat there with 150 points out of nowhere that none of us have considered. But the fact is that if there are these 5 subs, I think that could be really important, because I think one of the impacts is that we are going to end up expecting, like we have in this restart, 1 point all over the shop, and the bench becomes bare bones beyond, say, a 4.5 million defender in sub 1. And also, if that's the case, I wonder, could it be that, I know this is going to offend people like, the stat attack dog at FPL Analytic, we value a points per min basis rather than predictability of minutes and how we choose players. Yeah, right, I know it's powerful knowing that there's a starter, but for a team like Man City, where chances will be created at a high rate, you got players like Mahrez, who, I mean, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying about him only scoring a goal off the bench, but he's actually got the 4th highest points per start, and he's got the 3rd highest points per 90. He's at a middling price, so he started the season 8.5, I think it was. So it was 9.5. But he starts the season at middling price anyway because of the rotation threat. So does that price now go to outrageous value from being too risky because you've got 5 subs? Like, basically, is peak and trough better than a drip feed? And maybe this will be emblematized really well in the likes of Phil Foden, who we're guessing was going to get, similar to Mason Greenwood, maybe like a 7.5, a middling price next year. Maybe owning him and just playing him every week, and just, some weeks you can get 1, other weeks you might get 10 because of the amount of chances City create. Surely that could be worth it, right?
I mean, in terms of what Karen Taser asked us about if we've learned anything from Pep, I don't know if we have really. It's just to expect the unexpected with him. Don't expect, even if your player scores a hat-trick, say your own Sterling, and or you're planning on bringing in Sterling because he's got a hat-trick and everyone's bringing him in, he could easily not play the next week, and we've seen that in the restart as well. Last week, Sterling didn't start with that 1 point, but then this week I got 17 points from him. So I think ultimately it's just like, you can try and chase the points. I think a player like Sterling, a 1 and a 17 is better than 2 6-pointers, obviously. So it is worth chasing those highs, especially for a team like City, as you both said, that they're a team that create chances constantly and score goals constantly, and they can win any game 5-6-0. It's just who they play, who starts week in, week out, we don't often know. But I think there's space in our squads for at least a couple of these guys, and as long as you've got a bit of coverage. But I think with the 5-man bench as well, that is a bit of a concern in terms of your bench for the following season, because they could come on for 1 pointer. But with players like Mario, Sterling, even though they perhaps have been a little bit ineffectual from the bench, just from the stats, they've only scored a couple of goals. I think ultimately, I think they're worth having in your team, and you're just going to have to kind of deal with the frustrations as and when they come, because you might be frustrated 1 game week, but stick with these guys and they'll deliver a week later or the week after that.
one thing as well, I just think we've taken a very negative view of the 5 subs rule if it does come in. It may also mean that, let's say, players who were kind of seen as second choice just remain that way and just get substituted in really, really consistently, because a manager can do that. Now it's been kind of hard to guarantee that a player would get their minutes weekly off the bench if they weren't starting every second or third game. Whereas when there is 5 substitutes, it's going to be an awful lot easier to just be like, okay, Riyadh, you're going to get 30 minutes every week, no matter what. Like, Phil Foden, like, you never knew when he was going to play for most of the season. Whereas I think next season we could probably guarantee that someone who's in a Phil Foden-esque position this year will get their 10, their 20, their 25 minutes, whatever it might be, week in, week out, because there is just the space to do it. You've got keep one sub for contingency for an injury, 2 or 3 more are going to be just refreshing things, and then there's another.
I think that certainly seems to be the Klopp approach, with your likes of Minamino and Curtis Jones getting their 20 minutes a game, or Shaqiri as well, and Salah and Mane starting week in, week out. And that's what we like about Salah and Mane, is that they do have that security of starts, and that's the concern with Pep's players and Sterling and people.
With our brief mention of Matt Dawson meant that the game of rugby has come up once already in this pod, which is probably one more than most listeners want. But like, rugby has definitely evolved over the last few years to completely become a squad game. That I think it's Eddie Jones, the England manager, talks about he has starters and he has finishers. And the finishers are the players that come off the bench after the break and tend to, because England have the biggest playing pool in the world in rugby. I guess City would have the biggest talent pool in the league, given that they were able to afford it, and so that their finishers come on and actually tend to do an awful lot of the scoring. I know, obviously, rugby, different type of game, how defenses work, etc. But I think we will find that teams evolve slightly how they play and how they attack, especially weaker teams, when they are able to make the most of more subs, if the rule comes in. It hasn't been guaranteed yet.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if maybe one for you, Nick, to think about in terms of value over the summer. But if we say, I don't know, likes of Salah, likes of Mane, they're bound to play 70 minutes. So does that mean that we look at their value as their price times by the time that we expect them to be on the pitch? If the likes of Curtis Jones and the likes of Shaqiri or whoever replaced him, Minamino, it looks like he's the Firmino actually replacement, but who knows? Does that mean that moderates how we look at value? They're very interesting, but we'll have to see how that sort of shakes out. So maybe one for next season, and next season us to worry about. Next thing, Game Week 38 memories. So Rich Nyquist asked for our best Game Week 38 memories. I haven't had too many good ones, to be honest. Last year, I had captain Zaha. He got 3 assists, and that was pretty good. But I remember the year before, I captained Sterling, who blanked in that 100-point game week. And I mean, in the past, it's not been great either. So a couple of years ago, me and my friend Tak Ha were duking out in the middle league that Stag and Nick, you're both part of. And then we were having a roast dinner on the day, and it was all kind of quite jovial. But from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m., we were not friends. I got an early Vardy goal, and I edged them front by 3 points, right? So I was like, winning them in the league, and that's about £150. I was there, and just the approval of all of my peers. And in the 75th minute, Scott Dan got an assist, which netted Tak 3 points plus the 1 bonus he needed to win it. So, yeah, final days in general have not gone well for me. Zaha, fair enough. But elsewhere, it's not happened.
Poor Tak did a year later miss out. He had been gaining on me. I had a 100-point lead over him for about 10 weeks off, and he ended up getting it down to 1 solitary point in the final week. So Tak also had some Game Week 38 pain.
He's always there in the league. But what do you guys think about final game weeks? I mean, Nick, you're a double Game Week 37 specialist. But any 38 memories you can remember that were worth mentioning?
Last year wasn't particularly exciting. It just ended up on the 57 points. A very beige game week. Missed out on some of those big hauls like PVA and I think Trent, who hauled in that final week. But I remember the year before we started the pod, we had some Ben Davies fun, didn't we? When he got a big haul in that final game week, which was brilliant. And then I think owning him into the new season when we first started the pod, brought into the occasion the Ben Davies shrine, which I have missed actually. I have missed the old shrine. Perhaps there's space for him in my free hit team, maybe not. I don't know. But Ben Davies, that was a particular highlight, I guess, of Game 38. The low light, I think, was when just that season, I think it was when Chris Smalling, I owned him, and they were on for a clean sheet, and then he scored an own goal. And
The
I think
Bournemouth game, that was the game that happened on the Monday after the bomb threat.
it was, and I ended up, because of that, I ended up sort of going from about 8 points he was on to negative figures or something like that, just in the space of 2 minutes. So it was like really particularly frustrating, because that was just a series of points that I suddenly lost just at that last minute, and it really bumped my overall rank down, the rank that you have on the website for eternity, by about 6 or 7k or something. I was just like, no, why did that happen? So I remember that frustration. But yeah, those are my memories at least.
I don't have any like particularly poignant